A single mother dances for a very rich man to save her son. She discovers a shocking secret. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Everyone. Layla is a single mother and a refugee in Qatar. She has endured countless hardships. Each day is a struggle to put food on the table and protect her 3-year-old son. A single mother dances for a very rich man to save her son. She discovers a shocking secret. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which city you are watching from. Enjoy the story. Everyone. Layla, a single mother and a refugee in Qatar, had endured countless hardships. Each day was a struggle to put food on the table and protect her 3-year-old son from the harsh weight of poverty. She worked as a waitress in a modest cafe frequented by tourists. Her wages barely covered the basics. When the cafe owner announced he would have to cut back her working hours, her heart sank. She needed to find a solution quickly. Her son, Yusuf, would go hungry. One afternoon, as Layla was serving tables, she noticed a man sitting alone in a corner. He exuded power and mystery. His spotless white robe and piercing gaze caught her attention. She heard his name whispered by the customers. Khalid Al-Fahim, one of the richest and most mysterious men in Qatar. Khalid's eyes never left her. As the cafe closed, an employee approached Layla and handed her an envelope. "Mr. Al-Fahim asked me to give this to you," he said, before hurrying away. With shaking hands, Layla opened the envelope. Inside was a short, direct note. "Layla Roshan, I have a proposal that could solve your problems. Meet me tomorrow at 8 p.m. at the address below. Come alone. Khalid Al-Fahim." Her heart was beating very fast. A proposal from someone as powerful as Khalid could be the solution she needed. It could be the start of something dangerous. With Yusuf as her top priority, Layla decided to take the risk. The next evening, after putting Yusuf to sleep, Layla arrived at the address written in the note. It was a grand palace on the edge of the city. A butler escorted her to a very nice room where Khalid was waiting. He greeted her with a slight nod. He pointed to a chair in front of him. "Thank you for coming," Layla said. He began speaking in a calm, deep voice. "I've heard about your situation. I believe I can help you." Layla sat down, feeling the weight of the moment. "What do you want from me?" she asked directly. Khalid leaned forward slightly. "I needed a dancer." "A dancer?" Layla frowned. Confused. "Yes. Private performances. My guests appreciate art and tradition. In return, I offer a large amount. Enough to ensure you and your son never." She struggled again. She didn't say anything. Her heart was beating very fast. The offer seemed simple. She knew a man like Khalid wouldn't make such a proposal without wanting something in return. "Why me?" she asked. Khalid's gaze didn't move. "You have something special. You have a special quality that not many people have. You're beautiful," Khalid said. Layla felt a shiver run down her spine. "What are the conditions?" she asked. "Simple. You will dance only for me and my guests. There will be no physical contact. Everything will remain professional." The contract was clear. He passed a document to her. Layla quickly looked over the rules. Each one was more strange than the last. She stopped. The idea of dancing for Khalid and his guests made her nervous. The image of Yusuf going hungry appeared in her mind. Without thinking too much, she took the pen and signed. "Welcome to my world, Layla." Khalid gave a faint smile. A mix of mystery and danger. Layla didn't know it yet. That contract wouldn't just ensure Yusuf's survival. It would change their lives forever. The next evening, Layla found herself back at the palace. Feeling nervous but determined. The weight of the contract felt heavier now that she was about to perform for the first time. Still, the thought of Yusuf, safe and sleeping with a full stomach, kept her steady. She was led to a fancy room where traditional dance attire was laid out, an emerald dress with golden embroidery and see-through veils. The soft glow of the chandeliers layered with the sound of ankle bells as Layla moved through the room. The butler led her to a grand hall with luxurious tapestries and Persian rugs. Khalid sat on a sofa with two other men. He gestured for her to begin. The music started, a soft, hypnotic melody that flowed like the desert wind. Layla took a deep breath and started to move. Her arms moved through the air. The veils moved like waves. The ankle bells marked the rhythm. Each movement was deliberate yet naturally graceful. Khalid watched her closely. His face showed no emotion. His eyes revealed something deeper, curiosity, admiration. Perhaps something he himself didn't fully understand. Layla danced not just because she had to. As if she were silently telling a story. With every she remembered her journey to that moment. Her struggle for survival. Her love for her son. Her dance showed both strength and vulnerability. She didn't speak. She knew she was making herself understood. When the music ended, Layla gave a respectful bow and waited. The silence in the room was broken by the gentle sound of Khalid's applause. His guests followed suit, offering praise for her performance. "Impressive," Khalid said, finally standing up. "You've impressed me." "Thank you, Mr. Khalid." Layla remained calm. "You did well tonight. Keep it up. This arrangement will benefit us both." Khalid approached her and spoke in a low, almost confidential tone. "You've exceeded my expectations, Layla." "Thank you, Mr. Khalid." Before leaving, Layla nodded and left the room. Relieved. "You've impressed me. I'm glad to hear it." Layla remained calm. "Thank you, Mr. Khalid. You did well tonight. Keep it up. This arrangement will benefit us both." Layla simply nodded and left the room. Relieved. Later, as she made her way back to her room, Layla crossed paths with a strikingly imposing woman. Her sharp features and piercing eyes seemed to scrutinize every detail. Sophia, Khalid's cousin, made no effort to hide her disapproval as she glared at Layla. "So, you're collard greens dancer," Sophia said in a cold, sarcastic tone. "I hope you know your place." Layla remained calm. "My place is wherever my son is safe and well fed." Sophia raised an eyebrow, surprised by the firm response. "We'll see how long you last." Layla refused to be intimidated. She knew she would face opposition. Nothing would deter her. Her from her goal. Back in her room, Layla sat in front of the mirror, carefully removing her accessories. Her reflection revealed a tired but determined woman. Yusuf's face came to mind. She allowed herself a small smile. Downstairs, Khalid was still in the room. Now alone. His gaze lingered on the empty space where Layla had. Layla was in her room, thinking about her goal. She was tired, determined. She smiled when she thought of Yusuf. Khalid was still in the room. He was lost in thought. He thought about Layla, who had danced just minutes earlier. There was something about her that intrigued him. It was something he couldn't ignore. The third night came quickly. Layla was already beginning to grow accustomed to the palace's luxuries. Yet, despite the opulent surroundings, she knew that with every step she took there, she was dancing just minutes earlier. Lost in thought. There was something about her that intrigued him deeply. Something he couldn't ignore. The third night came quickly. Layla was already beginning to grow accustomed to the palace's luxuries. Yet, despite the opulent surroundings, she knew that with every step she took, she was delving deeper into an unknown and dangerous world. This time, the hall was even more magnificent, illuminated by crystal chandeliers. Khalid, seated at the center, was alone. The absence of guests intrigued her. She didn't dare ask. She simply adjusted her veils and waited for the music to begin. The first notes played softly. She danced just minutes earlier. Lost in thought. There was something about her that intrigued him deeply. Something he couldn't ignore. The third night came quickly. Layla was already beginning to grow accustomed to the palace's luxuries. Yet, despite the opulent surroundings, she knew that with every step she took there, as the desert breeze blew, Layla began her performance. Each movement precise yet fluid. The silence in the room was almost oppressive, broken only by the delicate sound of her ankle bells. Khalid watched her intently, his dark eyes following every spin and every graceful motion. When the music ended, Layla offered her customary bow. Khalid stared at her for a few moments before rising and approaching her. "You dance as if you carry the weight of 1,000 stories," he said in a low voice. Layla swallowed hard. "My story doesn't matter. I'm here to fulfill the contract." Khalid raised an eyebrow as though he hadn't expected such a direct response. He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to figure things out. "Sometimes a contract can be more than just words on paper," that he murmured before walking away. Layla felt a shiver run down her spine. Those words echoed in her mind as she left the hall. Her thoughts were interrupted when she once again encountered Safia in the corridor. Safia, with she danced just minutes earlier. Lost in thought. There was something about her that intrigued him deeply. Something he couldn't ignore. The third night came quickly. Layla was already beginning to grow accustomed to the palace's luxuries. Yet, despite the opulent surroundings, she knew that with every step she took, her cold eyes and cynical smile blocked Layla's path. "You think you know Khalid? Don't be fooled. He's a man of many secrets. I'm not interested in his secrets," Layla replied firmly, trying to stay calm. Safia let out a sharp laugh. "Ignorance is dangerous. Especially for someone like you." Before Layla could respond, Safia walked away, leaving a heavy air of distrust behind. Later that night, Layla heard footsteps in the hallway outside her room. Curious, she opened the door slightly and saw Khalid walking toward a secluded part of the palace. Intrigued, she followed him from a distance, staying hidden in the shadows that he entered a room. Layla could see inside. She couldn't hear everything. She could hear a conversation. She couldn't understand it. She didn't know what to think. She didn't know who Khalid was or why he chose her. When Khalid left the room, Layla quickly she took deep breaths to calm herself. She knew something was being kept from her. Something that could change everything. The next morning, Khalid invited her for an informal meeting in the palace garden. He appeared more relaxed. Dressed in light clothing. His gaze still carried the weight of hidden secrets. Truths. Layla. He began as they walked slowly among the flowers. Why did you accept my contract? She hesitated before answering. My son means everything to me. No matter what I have to do, I will do it to give him a better life. Khalid nodded as if he had anticipated her response. A mother's love is powerful. I wonder how much. Layla stopped and looked at him directly. Are you willing to sacrifice for him? Everything to the very last part of me. They stood in silence for a moment. Layla noticed a flicker of something in Khalid's expression. Perhaps respect. Perhaps something more. Then I hope you'll never have to prove it. He said. His tone was. She had danced just minutes earlier. Lost in thought. There was something about her that intrigued him deeply. Something he couldn't ignore. The third night came quickly. Layla was already beginning to grow accustomed to the palace's luxuries. Yet, despite the opulent surroundings, she knew that with every step she took, there. Cryptic. Before Layla could ask what he meant, Khalid changed the subject and guided her back to the palace. Later that night, Layla reflected on everything that had happened. She knew Khalid was hiding something. It unsettled her. Her priority remained Yusuf. If staying firm in this contract meant keeping her son safe, she would endure. Even if it meant greater sacrifice than she expected. Outside, Khalid stood by a large window, gazing at the full moon. His hands were clasped behind his back. He couldn't deny that Layla was different. She challenged his carefully maintained facade of control. She was a reminder that the past never truly stayed buried. As the night wore on, the secrets they both carried became more intertwined. Like the veils Layla wore in her dances, delicate yet full of hidden meaning. Layla woke early that morning. The peace was short-lived. Safiya lived as she adjusted her scarf in front of the mirror. A loud knock sounded at the door. Before she could answer, Safiya entered without permission. Her eyes looked cold and serious. I see you've adapted quickly to this place, Safiya said, crossing her arms. But don't be fooled. You're nothing more than a disposable piece in Khalid's game. Layla took a deep breath, refusing to react to the venom in the woman's words. Whatever his reasons are, they're none of your concern. Safiya stepped closer, narrowing her eyes. You think you know who he is. You're chasing an illusion. You're nothing more than a disposable piece in Khalid's game. Layla took a deep breath, refusing to react to the venom in the woman's words. Whatever his reasons are, they're none of your concern. Safiya stepped closer, narrowing her eyes. You think you know who he is. You're chasing an illusion. Khalid will never let someone like you get close to him. Layla held her gaze, feeling a quiet anger rise within her. I don't want to get close to Khalid. I'm here for my son's sake. Nothing more. Safiya's sarcastic laugh echoed through the room. We'll see how long that lie holds. Later. Illusion. Khalid will never let someone like you get close to him. Layla, she held her gaze, feeling a quiet anger rise within her. I don't want to get close to Khalid. I'm here for my son's sake. Nothing more. Safiya's sarcastic laugh echoed through the room. We'll see how long that lie holds. Later. Layla tried to focus on her dance lessons. The choreographer, a stern woman, corrected every movement with precision. Safia's constant presence loomed like a shadow, her words echoing in Layla's mind. Layla knew she couldn't afford to falter. Each perfected move was one step closer to Layla tried to focus on her dance lessons. The choreographer, a strict woman, corrected every movement with precision. Yet Safia's constant presence loomed like a shadow, her words echoing in Layla's mind. But Layla knew she couldn't afford to falter. Each perfect move was one step closer to ensuring Yusuf's safety. That evening, Khalid hosted an intimate dinner for a select few guests. Layla was summoned to perform again. The hall was adorned with candles, their warm glow illuminating the faces of those present. Safia was there, her triumphant expression suggesting she had something planned. Layla began to dance, focusing on every movement. The music filled the hall, creating an almost magical atmosphere. But as she twirled, her eyes met Khalid's. There was something in his gaze that unsettled her. Something that seemed to see beyond the dancer before him. Performance ended. The guests applauded politely. Safia rose and walked over to Khalid, ignoring Layla entirely. A beautiful display, wasn't it? She remarked, her smile cold. Yes. It was. Khalid replied calmly, though his eyes remained on Layla. Safia noticed and pressed her lips together. I hope Layla tried to focus on her dance lessons. The choreographer, a strict woman, corrected every movement precisely. But Safia's constant presence loomed like a shadow, her words echoing in Layla's mind. But Layla knew she couldn't criticize her. Each perfect move was one step closer to. You know what you're doing, cousin. A woman like her doesn't belong in this world. Khalid turned to Safia, his expression hardening. And what world is that? A world where we judge without understanding. Layla has more dignity than many who walk through these doors. Safia fell silent. Her anger she left the hall, leaving behind a tense atmosphere that in the following days. Layla tried to avoid Safia. She always seemed to be nearby. One night, Layla found a letter slipped under her door. The message was short and threatening: be careful who you trust. Your secret could cost you dearly. Layla felt upset. She knew Safia was behind it. She couldn't understand how the woman had discovered so much about her, determined to protect Yusuf. Layla went straight to Khalid. He was in his study, surrounded by piles of documents. He looked up as soon as she entered. I need to speak with you, Layla said firmly. Of course, Khalid replied, gesturing for her to sit. Layla hesitated but decided to get straight to the point. Your cousin Safia is trying to threaten me. I don't know what she wants. I can't. Layla tried to focus on her dance lessons. The choreographer, a strict woman, corrected every movement with precision. Yet Safia's constant presence loomed like a shadow, her words echoing in Layla's mind. But Layla knew she couldn't afford to falter. Each perfected move was one step closer to allowing this to affect my son. Khalid's brow furrowed, his expression hardening. Safia has no authority here. I will handle her. Can you guarantee that? Layla challenged, her eyes burning with determination. Because I won't risk Yusuf's safety. Khalid held her gaze for a long moment before responding. Layla tried to focus on her dance lessons. The choreographer, a strict woman, corrected every movement with precision. Yet Safiya's constant presence loomed like a shadow. Her words echoing in Layla's mind. But Layla knew she couldn't afford to falter. Each perfected move was one step closer to. Layla. I promise you. As long as you are under this roof. Nothing will happen to you or your son. Despite his firm tone. Layla knew it wouldn't be that simple. Safiya wouldn't give up easily. Later that night. Safiya met with an unknown man in a secluded corner of the palace. I want Layla exposed. Do whatever it takes to get me out of here. She said. Handing him an envelope. The man nodded and disappeared into the shadows. Safiya smiled. Convinced that Layla would soon be removed for good. Layla, however, was not one to back down. Her maternal instincts and unwavering determination, she was prepared for any battle ahead. Khalid, on the other hand, was beginning to see that Layla was no ordinary woman. She had a strength that defied everything around her. Including him. At the center of it all. Fate seemed to be weaving their lives together in an inescapable bond. Layla adjusted. Layla tried to focus on her dance lessons. The choreographer, a strict woman, corrected every movement precisely. Safiya's constant presence loomed like a shadow. Her words echoing in Layla's mind. Layla knew she couldn't afford to falter. Each perfectly executed move brought her closer to. Safiya's veiled threat still echoed in her mind. She couldn't let fear take hold. As she walked down the corridor toward the grand hall, she thought of Yusuf's face. Every step she took in that luxurious place was for him. Her dance wasn't just a performance. It was a matter of survival. When Layla entered the hall, the atmosphere was tense. Khalid was once again seated alone on his usual divan. The silence was only broken by the soft sound of bells on her ankles as she took her position. He made a slight gesture. The music began. The room was filled with a hypnotic melody. Layla's movements were precise. Her heart raced. Her mind struggled to stay in the present. Even as the weight of her worries threatened to overwhelm her. For her, the dance was more than just a contract, it was a way to express all the anguish and hope she carried within. Khalid, on the other hand, watched her with unusual. He seemed captivated. As though each of her gestures revealed something he had never noticed before, there was a silent connection between them. Something Layla couldn't explain but couldn't ignore either. After the dance, Khalid slowly approached her without saying a word. He stopped just a few steps away. His eyes locked on her. You're stronger than you seem. His tone was both an observation and a compliment. Layla remained silent. She didn't know how to respond. She was there simply to fulfill her part of the agreement. Khalid's intensity unsettled her. You dance as though you carry the weight of something much greater. What makes you so strong? She hesitated before answering. My son. He's the reason for everything. Khalid nodded slowly, as if understanding more than she expected. Yusuf is lucky to have you as his mother. Layla looked away, feeling a mix of pride and vulnerability before she could respond. Khalid added. Sophia will no longer be a problem. I promise to protect you and your son. I will keep my word. There was sincerity in his voice. Layla knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. Sophia was dangerous. She needed to stay one step ahead. Later that night, Layla was urgently called to Yusuf's room. The boy had a high fever. His small what makes you strong. She paused for a moment before answering. My son. He's the reason for everything. Khalid nodded slowly. As if understanding more than she expected. Yusuf is lucky to have you as his mother. Layla looked away, feeling a mix of pride and vulnerability. Before she could respond, Khalid added, Sophia will no longer. Her body trembled beneath the blankets. Desperate, Layla tried to cool his forehead with a damp cloth, whispering words of comfort. Khalid appeared at the door moments later, alarmed by Layla's distress. What's going on? He asked, stepping into the room. He has a fever, Layla said, her voice trembling. I need to take him to a doctor. Khalid gestured quickly, summoning one of his assistants. Prepare the car immediately, that will take them to the best hospital in the city. Layla looked at Khalid, surprised and grateful despite everything. He didn't hesitate to help. Minutes later, they were on their way to the hospital, Layla holding Yusuf's small hand the entire time. At the hospital, Yusuf was treated quickly and the doctor told them it was nothing serious. It's just a high fever. He needs rest and plenty of fluids, the doctor said before sending them home. Back at the palace, Layla laid Yusuf in bed and sat by his side, watching him sleep. Khalid remained at the door, silent as if respecting the moment. Thank you, Layla said finally without turning to face him. Everything. There's no need to thank me, Khalid replied. I did what anyone would do. Layla let out a quiet sigh. Not everyone would. Khalid took a few steps into the room, stopped before getting too close. Yusuf is important to you. That what makes you strong? She paused, thinking about his question. My son is the reason for everything. Khalid nodded slowly, as if he had more in mind than she expected. Yusuf is lucky to have you as his mother. Layla looked away, feeling a mix of pride and vulnerability. Before she could respond, Khalid added, Sophia will no longer make him important to me as well. Layla finally looked at him, puzzled. There was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. Khalid seemed sincere. There was also a sadness that didn't match his authoritative manner. Why are you doing all this? She asked, breaking the silence. Khalid. He hesitated for a moment. What gives you that strength? She hesitated before replying. My son. He's the reason for everything. Khalid nodded slowly, as if understanding more than she expected. Yusuf is lucky to have you as his mother. Layla looked away, feeling a mix of pride and vulnerability. Before she could respond, Khalid added, Sophia will no longer. Before answering, perhaps because you remind me of something I lost a long time ago. Those words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Layla didn't know how to respond. Felt that Khalid was, in some way, opening up to her, revealing layers he kept hidden from the rest of the world. That night, Layla barely slept. Khalid's words. What gives you that strength? She hesitated before replying. My son. He's the reason for everything. Khalid nodded slowly, as if understanding more than she expected. Yusuf is lucky to have you as his mother. Layla looked away, feeling a mix of pride and vulnerability. Before she could respond, Khalid added, Sophia will no longer. Echoed in her mind, mingling with her own doubts and fears. She knew her position in the palace was precarious. She was also starting to sense that something deeper was unfolding. Meanwhile, downstairs, Khalid remained in his study, his eyes fixed on an old photograph he held in his hands. The image showed a smiling woman. What makes you strong? She paused before answering. My son is the reason for everything. Khalid nodded slowly, as if understanding more than she expected. Yusuf is lucky to have you as his mother. Layla looked away, feeling a mix of pride and vulnerability. Before she could respond, Khalid added, Sophia will no longer. Holding a small child. He ran his thumb over the woman's face. His eyes filled with memories. I promised I'd never let this happen again. He murmured to himself, before tucking the photo away and turning off the lights. He continued. Fate seems determined to intertwine Layla's and Khalid's lives even further. What lies ahead will test their strength and convictions. The palace's golden lights reflected off the cold marble walls. As Layla walked down the main corridor, her footsteps echoed. Her mind was preoccupied with thoughts of Yusuf and Khalid. Her constant concern for her son's safety now shared space with Khalid's enigmatic words. You remind me what makes you strong. She paused, thinking hard, before answering. My son is the reason for everything. Khalid nodded slowly, as if understanding more than she expected. Yusuf is lucky to have you as his mother. Layla looked away, feeling a mix of pride and vulnerability. Before she could respond, Khalid added, Sophia will no longer. Of something I lost. Her thoughts were interrupted when she turned a corner and came face to face with Sophia. Khalid's cousin was dressed elegantly. Her eyes were like blades sharp and full of disdain. You've done well to capture Khalid's attention, Sophia said with a venomous smile. But don't be fooled. He may seem kind, but he was determined to protect his reputation. I don't care what anyone thinks, Layla said, standing her ground. I'm here for my son. Sophia took a step forward. Her voice was low but threatening. Be careful what you say. You're dealing with powers you don't understand. Layla looked into Sophia's eyes. But he's ruthless when it comes to protecting his reputation. I'm not interested in anyone's approval, Layla replied, standing firm. I'm here only for my son. Sophia took a step forward, her voice low but threatening. Be careful what you say. You're playing with forces you don't understand. Before she could respond, Khalid appeared in the corridor. His quick stride suggested he had overheard part of the exchange. Sophia, he called, his voice low yet commanding. May I have a word with you in private? Layla remained where she was, watching as Sophia walked away with Khalid. The tension in the air was palpable. Something was about to happen. Something significant was about to happen. Layla knew it would be wise to stay alert. Khalid led Sophia into one of the palace offices and shut the door. His usually calm face now looked hard. I want you to stop your scheming, he said, crossing his arms. I'm only protecting our family. Significant was about to happen. Layla knew it would be wise to stay alert. Khalid led Sophia into one of the palace offices and shut the door. His usually calm face now looked hard. Stop your scheming, he said, crossing his arms. I'm only protecting our family, Sophia replied, her chin raised defiantly. Layla is a threat to everything we've built, Khalid said. Layla is not a threat, Sophia shot back. Her voice was full of anger. She's a woman trying to protect her son. Something you clearly don't understand. She's an outsider. Do you trust her more than your own family? Khalid asked. I trust her because she's proven her loyalty, Khalid said firmly, and you've only given me reasons to question yours. Sophia's face paled momentarily. She quickly regained her composure. If you keep defending her, you'll bring disgrace to our family. Enough, Khalid cut her off. His voice sharp as a blade. If you try to harm Layla or Yusuf again, I'll have no choice but to remove you from this palace for good. A heavy silence fell between them before Sophia abruptly left the room, leaving Khalid alone with his thoughts. Meanwhile, Layla sat in her room with Yusuf, who was playing with small wooden blocks Khalid had sent for him. She watched her. Son, I can't stop thinking about Khalid. He's a complex person, sometimes protective, sometimes distant, always mysterious. When there was a knock at the door, she braced herself for more trouble. But it was Khalid. May I speak with you? He asked, remaining at the doorway. Layla nodded, signaling that he could enter. Khalid stepped in but kept a respectful distance. I want you to know that you're safe here, he said, sincerity in his eyes. I won't allow Sophia or anyone else to threaten you or Yusuf. I appreciate that, Layla replied, folding her arms. I can't help wondering why you're so willing to protect us. Khalid sighed, looking away for a moment before meeting her gaze again. You remind me of something I lost, he said, his voice now tinged with emotion. My wife passed away years ago. With her I lost the chance to have a family. Seeing you fight for your son, it reminds me of what truly matters. Layla remained silent, Khalid's words hitting her in an unexpected way. There was something genuine in his confession, something that made her want to believe him. Thank you, she said softly at last. Khalid gave a faint smile. Get some rest, Layla. Tomorrow will be an important day. The next morning, Sophia, still furious after Khalid's reprimand, schemed in secret. In her room, she reviewed plans with the same mysterious man she had met earlier. Everything must be perfect, she said, handing him a folder of documents. I want Layla exposed once and for all. Outside, one of the palace guards overheard part of their conversation and quickly reported it to Khalid. Upon hearing the news, Khalid immediately understood that Sophia was willing to cross any line to achieve her goals, that he knew he had to act before anything more serious happened. By nightfall, Khalid summoned Layla to the main hall. She felt tense but accepted the invitation as soon as she entered. Khalid approached her with determination in his eyes. Layla, I want you are not alone in this fight. I will make sure nothing happens to you or Yusuf. Layla looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. I hope you're right, Khalid. I've already lost everything once. I can't lose my son. Khalid nodded. I won't let that happen. That night marked the start of a new battle where loyalties would be tested and secrets would finally come to light. The palace was cloaked in an unsettling calm. After ordering that Sophia be placed under surveillance, Khalid went to the reading room, a place where memories often haunted him. Layla, meanwhile, sat in her room, burdened by attention. I trust her because she's proven her loyalty, Khalid said firmly. And you? You've only given me reasons to question yours. Sophia's face paled momentarily. She quickly regained her composure. Enough, Khalid cut her off. If you keep defending her, you'll bring disgrace to our family. I will make sure nothing happens to you or Yusuf, Layla said, feeling the weight of his words. I hope you're right, Khalid. I've already lost everything once. I can't lose my son. Khalid nodded. I won't let that happen. That night marked the start of a new battle where loyalties would be tested and secrets would finally come to light. The palace was cloaked in an unsettling calm. You've proven your loyalty, Sophia. I appreciate it. But you've also given me reasons to question yours. If you keep defending her, you'll bring disgrace to our family. Sophia's face paled momentarily. She quickly regained her composure. Enough. If you try to begin a new battle where loyalties will be tested and secrets will finally come to light, it will be the start of a new era. The palace was cloaked in an unsettling calm. After ordering that Sophia be placed under surveillance, Khalid went to the reading room. A place where memories often haunted him. Layla, meanwhile, sat in her room, burdened by attention. I trust her because she has proven her loyalty. You have only given me reasons to question yours. Sophia's face paled momentarily. She quickly regained her composure. If you keep defending her, you'll bring disgrace to our family. Enough, Khalid cut her off. His voice was sharp as a blade. She couldn't quite explain. Something inside her told her she was on the verge of uncovering truths that could change everything. Later that evening, Khalid sent a note asking Layla to meet him in the main hall. When she arrived, he stood by a large fireplace, his eyes fixed on the flames. Layla. Thank you for coming, he said. Why did you call me? She asked, crossing her arms. Khalid turned slowly, his expression serious. There are things you need to know. My past. My losses. They weigh more heavily on us than you realize. I believe I have the right to know, Layla said, frowning. If it's something that could affect us, I want to know. He nodded and gestured for her to sit. Years ago, I lost my wife in an accident. It was a moment that shattered everything I thought was secure. Since then, I've shut myself off from the world, refusing to let anyone get close. But then you came along. Layla felt a chill. She stayed silent, listening intently. You are not just. He nodded and gestured for her to sit. Years ago, I lost my wife in an accident. It was a moment that shattered everything I thought was secure. Since then, I've shut myself off from the world, refusing to let anyone get close. But then you came along. Layla felt a chill, stayed silent, listening intently. You are not just a dancer in my palace, Layla. You've brought something I thought I had lost forever, hope. Khalid continued, his voice softer. The way you fight for Yusuf reminds me of what truly matters in life. I see my own struggles in yours. I also see a strength I have long since lost. Why are you telling me all this now? Layla asked. Trying to understand his words, Khalid stepped closer. His eyes locked on hers, because to protect you and your son, I need you to trust me completely. For that, you need to know the whole truth. Layla stayed silent as Khalid went on. He revealed that his wife's death had not been just an accident, the result of intrigue within his own family. This explained why he kept Sophia under surveillance and why he was so determined to protect Layla. My family never accepted my wife. She didn't come from a noble social circle. To them, that was unacceptable, Khalid said, his voice heavy with bitterness. We paid the price for defying them. She lost her life. Layla felt a lump in her throat. She had never imagined that Khalid carried such deep pain. Now you think Sophia will do the same to me? It's not a matter of thinking. Layla. I know. She has already shown she's willing to go to any lengths to get rid of you. That's why you must always be on your guard. Trust no one but me. Khalid's words hung in the air, filled with intensity. Layla felt torn. On one hand, she wanted to believe he was being sincere. On the other hand, trusting him meant placing her fate in the hands of a man who still harbored many secrets. The next morning, Layla decided to seek answers on her own. After ensuring Yusuf was safe, she walked through the palace to the secluded wing, where Khalid kept personal documents and belongings. She needed to learn more about the man who had promised to protect her family. Entering the room, Layla found a photo album on the table that it contained images of Khalid alongside a smiling woman and a young boy. The happiness on their faces was very different from the serious expression Khalid wore now. As she flipped through the album, a letter fell out. Layla picked it up and read the handwritten words that it was a farewell message from Khalid's wife, written shortly before her death. My dearest Khalid, I know our love will face storms. Never forget what we built together. Protect our family, even if it costs everything. With eternal love, Amal. Tears filled Layla's eyes as she read. At last she understood the burden Khalid carried. He wasn't just protecting her. He was trying to make up for a past failure he couldn't prevent. Later Khalid found Layla sitting quietly in the garden. He approached her slowly, aware that something had changed. He read the letter. Khalid said bluntly. Layla simply nodded. Now I understand why you do what you do. Even so, it doesn't change the fact that we're caught in a dangerous game. Khalid sighed, sitting down beside her. I don't want you to go through what Amal went through. I don't want to lose anyone else. Then what do we do now? Layla asked, her eyes full of determination. Khalid looked toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set. That we fight. We won't let anyone take away what's ours. That night, Layla felt more confident. The first time, she saw Khalid not as a distant and mysterious man, as someone who carried the same pain and strength as she did, despite the dangers. She felt that together they could overcome any obstacle. While Layla put Yusuf to bed, Khalid in another part of the palace began devising a plan that he knew Safiya still had tricks up her sleeve. He was ready to do whatever it took to protect Layla and Yusuf. The pieces were in motion. Fate would soon test them all. Layla woke with a sense of unease. The palace, usually serene in the morning, seemed cloaked in a heavy tension. As she dressed, she heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. Opening the door, she found a maid with a pale face who warned her. Miss Safiya is planning something. Be careful. Everyone was aware of the tension in the air. Layla forced herself to stay calm. She knew Safiya wouldn't give up easily. The only thing she could do was be prepared for whatever might come. Later, Khalid summoned Layla to his office. He was seated behind a dark wooden desk, surrounded by documents. His eyes, usually calm, now reflected a concern he tried to conceal. I've received information that Safiya is using her influence to discredit you, Khalid said plainly. She's handed over a dossier to the local authorities, accusing you of dishonoring traditions. She felt a lump in her throat. She had never imagined that Khalid carried such deep pain. Now you think Safiya will do the same to me? It's not a matter of thinking, Layla. I know, Khalid replied. She has already shown that she's willing to do anything to get rid of you. That's why you must always be on your guard and protect the palace's reputation. Layla felt the ground shift beneath her. This could put me in danger. I know, Khalid replied, his voice steady. I've already taken measures. I need you to trust me. Trust isn't something I can give so easily. Layla countered. Her tone bitter. Khalid leaned forward. His eyes met hers. I know it's hard. You're not alone. I will protect you. Layla. No matter the cost. Meanwhile. In another part of the palace. Safia walked down the corridor with a man. He looked normal. He was dangerous. She led him to a private room and gave him a thick envelope. Do. His eyes fixed on hers. I know it's hard. You're not alone in this. I will protect you. Layla. No matter the cost. Meanwhile. In another part of the palace. Safia walked down the corridor with a man. He appeared unassuming but dangerous. She led him to a private room and placed a thick envelope in his hands. Do whatever is necessary. She ordered. I want Layla out of this palace by the end of the week. The man nodded and disappeared into the shadows. Safia smiled. Convinced her plan was about to succeed. That night. Layla felt restless. She felt an inner urge to act before it was too late. She decided to confront Safia directly. She knew it was dangerous. She was determined to confront Safia, after making sure Yusuf was safe. She walked down the hallway to Safia's room when she opened the door. She saw Safia sitting in front of a mirror. Adjusting her beautiful jewelry. I see you've come to confront me, Safia said. Not even turning around. Why are you doing this? Layla asked her. Her voice was full of emotion. Safia finally stood up and turned to face her. Because you don't belong here, Khalid is my family. You're just an intruder. Pulling him away from his responsibilities. That I'm not here for Khalid, Layla replied. Her anger evident in her words. That I'm here for my son. Trying to survive, this has nothing to do with you. Safia stood. Her voice heavy with emotion. Because you don't belong here. Khalid is my family. You're just an intruder. Pulling him away from his true responsibilities. I'm not here for Khalid, Layla replied. Her anger evident in her words. I'm here for my son. Trying to survive. This has nothing to do with you. Safia stepped forward. Her gaze cold. Everything that happens under this roof involves me. I will not let you ruin our reputation with your presence. Before Layla could respond. The door to the room burst open. Khalid entered. His eyes blazing with fury. Safia. Enough, he roared. His voice echoing through the room. Safia froze. Clearly startled by her cousin's sudden arrival, Khalid advanced until he was face to face with her. If I find out you've taken any further action against Layla or Yusuf, you will be banished from this palace, and this time there will be no second chances. Safia pressed her lips together. Said nothing, Khalid. Safia stepped forward. Her gaze cold. Everything that happens under this roof involves me. I will not let you ruin our reputation with your presence. Before Layla could respond. The door to the room burst open. Khalid entered. His eyes blazing with fury. Safia. Enough, he roared. His voice echoed through the room. Then he turned to Layla. It's not safe for you here. Come. Layla hesitated but followed him. As they walked through the corridors. Khalid explained. Safia is out of control. I need to deal with her once and for all. And how do you plan to do that? Layla asked. Her concern evident. Khalid stopped and turned to her. I'm going to convene The family council needs to know just how far Safia is willing to go. In the meantime, I want you to stay away from her. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the palace grew even more tense. Safia appeared more reserved. Layla knew it was merely the calm before the storm. Khalid was constantly preoccupied. Safia stepped forward. Her gaze cold. Everything that happens under this roof involves me. I will not let you ruin our reputation with your presence. Before Layla could respond, the door to the room burst open. Khalid entered, his eyes blazing with fury. Safia. Enough, he roared. His voice echoed through the room. Preparing for the council meeting. One evening, Layla was summoned to the main hall for an urgent meeting with Khalid. When she arrived, she found him standing beside two men who appeared to be members of the family council. They were speaking in low voices. Fell silent when they saw her. Layla. I want you to meet Mr. Abbas. Safia stepped forward. Her gaze was cold. Everything that happens under this roof involves me. I will not let you ruin our reputation with your presence. Before Layla could respond, the door to the room burst open. Khalid entered. His eyes were blazing with fury. Enough. He roared. His voice echoed through the room. And Mr. Rashid, Khalid said, introducing the men. They are members of the council and are here to evaluate the situation. Layla greeted them. Felt a chill run down her spine. Abbas's scrutinizing gaze seemed to pierce right through her. While Rashid maintained a neutral expression. We're here to ensure that everything is. Safia stepped forward. Her gaze cold. Everything that happens under this roof involves me. I will not let you ruin our reputation with your presence. Before Layla could respond, the door to the room burst open. Khalid entered. His eyes blazing with fury. Enough, he roared. His voice echoed through the room. Resolved fairly, Abbas said in a stern voice. We trust that you'll cooperate. Layla simply nodded, aware that every word and gesture she made would be scrutinized. While Khalid and the council discussed the next steps, Safia was plotting her final move. In a secluded room, she reviewed incriminating documents that could be used against her. Safia stepped forward with a cold gaze. Everything that happens under this roof involves me. I will not let you ruin our reputation with your presence. Before Layla could respond, the door to the room burst open. Khalid entered. His eyes blazing with fury. Enough, he roared. I used this against Layla. Her plan was straightforward, deliver the information directly to the authorities. Ensuring Layla's expulsion from the country and, hopefully, separation from Yusuf forever. Khalid had anticipated this move. He sent one of his trusted men to intercept the documents before they could reach the wrong people. Safia stepped forward. Her gaze was cold. Everything that happens under this roof involves me. I will not let you ruin our reputation with your presence. Before Layla could respond, the door to the room burst open. Khalid entered. His eyes were blazing with fury. Enough. He roared. His voice echoed through the room. When Safia discovered this, she was furious. There was nothing more she could do without fully exposing herself. The next morning, Khalid summoned everyone to the grand hall. The family council was present, as were Safia and Layla. The tension in the room was almost tangible as Khalid stepped to the center. His Safia stepped forward. Her eyes were cold. Everything that happens under this roof involves me. I will not let you ruin our reputation with your presence. Before Layla could respond, the door to the room burst open. Khalid entered. His eyes were blazing with fury. Enough, he roared. Safia. It's time to resolve this once and for all, he said firmly. Safia has acted against Layla and Yusuf, jeopardizing the safety and honor of this palace. Safia tried to defend herself. Khalid raised his hand, silencing her. There is no room for your excuses. He continued. You have violated the trust. Safia stepped forward. Her gaze was cold. Everything that happens under this roof involves me. I will not let you ruin our reputation with your presence. Before Layla could respond, the door to the room burst open. Khalid entered. His eyes were blazing with fury. Enough, he roared. The council will decide your fate. The council will decide your fate. The council members deliberated. Finally, Abbas stood and declared. We agree that Safia must be removed from the palace. Her actions are unacceptable. The family's safety must take precedence. Curious. Safia stormed out of the Safia stepped forward. Her gaze cold. Everything that happens under this roof involves me. I will not let you ruin our reputation with your presence. Before Layla could respond, the door to the room burst open. Khalid entered. His eyes blazing with fury. Enough, he roared. His voice echoed through the room. Without looking back, Khalid exhaled. Relieved. Approached Layla. You're safe now, he said. Layla knew that even with Safia gone, the challenges were far from over. Layla woke in the middle of the night to a strange noise coming from the hallway. Her heart raced as she got up and carefully opened the door to peek out. Two men in dark uniforms were approaching, followed by Safia, who wore a cold smile. Before Layla could close the door, they spotted her. You're being summoned to answer to the authorities, one of the men said, his voice firm. What am I being accused of? Layla asked, alarmed but maintaining her composure. Violating the country's morality laws. You need to come with us. The man replied without emotion. Before Layla could respond, Khalid appeared in the hallway. His anger was clear. His powerful presence made the men hesitate. What is the meaning of this? Khalid demanded. We've received a formal complaint, one of the officials explained. We're just following orders. Khalid stepped closer, his dominant stance intimidating the men. Who authorized this action? I want to see the documents. The officer handed Khalid a document, which he quickly scanned, his eyes narrowing with each line. He knew this was Safia's doing, even though her name didn't appear on it. This is absurd, Khalid declared, tearing the paper in half. Layla is my guest. No one will lay a hand on her while she's under my roof. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Safia stepped forward. The law is above any hospitality, Khalid, she said with a malicious smile. You can't, this is absurd, Khalid declared, tearing the paper in half. This woman has no right to be here. Layla is my guest. No one will lay a hand on her while she's under my roof. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Safia stepped forward. The law is above any hospitality, she said with a malicious smile. You can't protect her forever. Enough. Safia. Khalid roared, his voice echoing through the hallway. You've done enough to harm Layla. If you continue with this madness, you'll face the consequences. The officers sensed Khalid's unwavering stance and decided to withdraw for now, though they made it clear that the investigation would continue. That night, Khalid gathered his trusted men. Safia has gone too far. She's willing to destroy Layla just to get to me. What should we do? One of the men asked. Khalid stopped and looked out the window. That we need to find something that will completely expose her. Something that will prove to the authorities. Protect her forever. Enough. Safia. Khalid roared, his voice echoing through the hallway. You've done enough to harm Layla. If you continue with this madness, you'll face the consequences. The officers sensed Khalid's unwavering stance and decided to withdraw for now, though they made it clear that the accusations against Layla were false and that Safia was the real culprit. Meanwhile, Layla was in her room trying to soothe Yusuf, who had woken up frightened by the commotion. Mommy's here, she whispered, holding him close. Nothing will happen to us. Deep down, Layla felt that danger was closer than ever. She knew Khalid was doing everything possible to protect them. He also knew Safia wouldn't stop until she was destroyed. The next morning, Layla was called to the main hall, where Khalid was waiting for her. We need to talk, he said, gesturing to a chair. Layla sat down, feeling the weight of what was to come. What happened? The authorities are still investigating, Khalid explained. Safia is playing dirty. She submitted falsified documents and accusations. That could make things more complicated. What if they believe her? Layla asked, her voice shaking. Yusuf, is he in danger? Khalid closed his eyes for a moment before answering. I promise nothing will happen to him. We need to be strategic. We'll face this together. As Layla tried to stay calm, Khalid continued his investigation. That he knew Safia had fabricated evidence. He needed something concrete to prove it. With the help of his contacts, he intercepted a message Safia had sent to the man working for her. The message was clear. Make sure Layla is formally charged. If necessary, plant evidence. With this in hand, Khalid knew he had the upper hand. He arranged a meeting with the authorities to expose Safia and protect Layla. Hours before the meeting, Layla was approached by officers again. This time, they arrived with a formal arrest warrant. Khalid tried to intervene. The men were determined to take her. Please take care of Yusuf, Layla said to Khalid as she was escorted out of the palace. Promise me he'll be safe. I promise, Khalid replied. His face grim. Layla was taken to a local prison. A cold and desolate place. Her cell was small, with a metal bed and a tiny window that let in only a little bit of light. She sat on a thin mattress, trying not to cry. Outside, Khalid did something. He got the documents that showed Safia was guilty and gave them to the authorities. Something unexpected happened when Safia was asked to speak in court. She was angry. She tried to deny everything. The evidence was undeniable. You tried to accuse an innocent woman, Khalid said during the hearing, and for that, you will be held accountable. The authorities decided to release Layla while they conducted a deeper investigation into Safia's actions. Khalid went personally to retrieve her from protect her forever. Enough. Safia. Khalid roared. His voice echoed through the hallway. You've done enough to harm Layla. If you continue with this madness, you'll face the consequences. The officers sensed Khalid's unwavering stance and decided to withdraw for now, though they made it clear that the investigation would continue. The prison. When Layla emerged from her cell, she saw Khalid waiting for her. He looked relieved, though concern still lingered in his eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, taking her arm. "Yes," Layla replied, though her voice was weak. "And Yusuf?" Khalid asked. "He's safe," Layla assured him. "Let's go home." On the way back to the palace, Layla remained. "Enough!" Safia Khalid shouted. Her voice echoed through the hallway. "You've done enough to harm Layla. If you continue with this madness, you'll face the consequences." The officers sensed Khalid's unwavering stance and decided to withdraw for now, though they made it clear that the investigation would continue. Silent, she tried to process everything that had happened. When they arrived, Yusuf ran into her arms. Layla held him tightly, silently vowing to do whatever it took to protect him. Khalid watched the scene from a distance, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. But he knew the battle wasn't over yet. Safia would face justice. He would do everything he could to make sure Layla and Yusuf could live in peace. The next morning was quiet. Layla was still feeling the weight of the past few days, even though she was back in the palace. Safia's threat was still there. Yusuf played in the garden, watched by one of the maids. Layla walked slowly through the palace's hallways. She was called to the main hall, where Khalid was waiting for her. He sat in an armchair near the window, looking out at the distant desert when Layla entered. He stood up, his posture tense. "We need to talk," he said. His voice was firm but calm. Layla nodded and sat in a nearby chair. Layla walked slowly through the palace's hallways. She was called to the main hall, where Khalid was waiting for her. He sat in an armchair near the window, looking out at the distant desert. When Layla entered, he stood up, his posture tense. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm yet calm. Layla nodded and sat in a nearby chair. "Since you arrived at the palace, your presence has affected me in ways I didn't expect. I tried to keep everything professional. I can no longer ignore what I feel." Layla stared at him, surprised, said nothing. Khalid continued, "You're strong, Layla. Your determination to protecting Yusuf. Your courage in the face of everything you've endured. It made me see things I had buried long ago. I'm not the man I was before I lost him all. With you, I feel like I can start again." His words left her breathless. Layla knew Khalid had a kind and protective side. She had never imagined he could have feelings for her. "Khalid, Layla began. Her voice faltered. She tried to gather her thoughts. The intensity of the moment made it difficult. "I know this might be overwhelming for you right now," Khalid said, breaking the silence. "I needed to be honest. I don't expect an answer from you immediately, Layla." Layla felt many emotions. Khalid said, "I know this might be overwhelming for you right now, but I needed to be honest. I don't expect an answer from you immediately. I just wanted you to know what's in my heart." Layla lowered her gaze. She felt a whirlwind of emotions. "Everything I've done has been for Yusuf," she said at last. "But somehow you've become part of that. I don't know what to think," Khalid said. "My life has been so chaotic. I'm not sure I can trust something that feels too good to be true." Khalid stepped closer to her, his voice gentle. "You don't have to decide anything now. Just know that I'm here. No matter what happens, you'll never be alone again." The conversation with Khalid left her deep in thought for the rest of the day. As she watched Yusuf play, Layla reflected on his words. She had always built walls around her heart. Khalid seemed determined to break through them. Later, Khalid joined them in the garden that he knelt beside Yusuf, who was building a tower with wooden blocks. That tower's getting pretty tall, little one, Khalid said with a smile. Yusuf looked up at him, laughing. It's going to reach the clouds. Layla watched the interaction with a mix of surprise and warmth. Khalid, who once seemed distant and stern, was now relaxed, almost like a father. It was clear he had a genuine affection for Yusuf. That evening, Khalid invited Layla to dinner on one of the palace terraces. The setting was illuminated by lanterns. The soft sound of music filled the air. Layla hesitated but accepted the invitation. As they ate, Khalid broke the silence. I know everything you've been through here has been difficult. I want you to know I'm working to ensure that Sophia will never have power over you or Yusuf again. Thank you, Layla replied, keeping her eyes on her plate. It's hard to forget everything that's happened. Khalid nodded in understanding. I don't expect you to forget. I want you to trust that I'm on your side. I always will be. There was a moment of silence between them, broken only by the soft music playing in the background. Then Khalid stood and reached out his hand to Layla. Dance with me. Khalid felt a strong desire for Layla. Layla began. Her voice faltered. She tried to gather her thoughts. The intensity of the moment made it difficult. I know this might be overwhelming for you right now, Khalid said, breaking the silence. But I needed to be honest. I don't expect an answer from you immediately. Me? Layla looked at him, surprised. Now, he said with a gentle smile. She hesitated but took his hand. Khalid guided her to the center of the terrace, where they began to dance under the starry sky. Their movements were slow and natural. Layla realized that, the first time in a long while, she felt safe. As they danced, Khalid whispered, Layla, since you arrived, you've brought light to this place. I hope you can see that. She didn't respond. The silence between them was filled with meaning. After the dance, Layla retired to her room while Khalid remained on the terrace, lost in thought. He knew he had taken an important step by confessing. Layla had feelings for Khalid. She was nervous. She tried to think about something. It was hard to focus. I know this might be overwhelming for you right now, Khalid said. But I needed to be honest. I don't expect an answer from you immediately. Khalid understood that it would take time to earn Layla's trust. Elsewhere in the palace, Sophia was already planning her next move. She had been informed of the growing closeness between the two. The anger in her eyes was unmistakable. She was determined not to let Layla claim a place so close to Khalid. While Layla tried to rest, she couldn't stop thinking about what Khalid had said. She knew her journey was far from over. Somehow she felt that she had found someone in Khalid she could rely on. The night passed slowly. As Layla watched Yusuf sleep, she thought about Khalid's words. Was it possible to build something new amid the chaos? The next feelings for her, Khalid. Layla began. She hesitated. She tried to collect her thoughts. The intensity of the moment made it difficult. I know this might be overwhelming for you right now, Khalid said, breaking the silence. But I needed to be honest. I don't expect an answer from you immediately. Day could bring more changes. Layla was determined to face whatever came her way. alongside those willing to fight with her. The sun rose over the desert horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. Layla woke with a strange feeling, a mixture of relief and concern. Khalid's words still echoed in her mind. She remembered his kind gesture from the night before, when he asked her to dance. While Layla put on a light tunic, she looked at Yusuf, who was still peacefully asleep. He was the center of her world. He was the reason she was willing to face any challenge. Khalid had promised to protect them. Layla knew that trusting someone was never easy. As she came down for breakfast, she found Khalid at the table. He had a cup of coffee in his hands. He looked thoughtful. He greeted her he smiled slightly and said good morning. His voice was low but warm. Good morning, Layla replied, taking a seat across from him. There was a brief silence before Khalid broke it. Layla, there's something I need to discuss with you. She frowned slightly, sensing a bit of tension in the air. What is it? Khalid set his cup down. Sophia hasn't been completely neutralized. She still has allies outside the palace. People willing to help her cause trouble. Layla felt her stomach turn. She kept her composure. What does that mean for us? It means we need to be careful. Khalid explained. I want you and Yusuf to stay within the palace as much as possible. I'm increasing security. I can't underestimate Sophia's intentions. Layla nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my son. I'll do whatever it takes to protect both of you, Khalid added, his voice unwavering. That afternoon, Layla decided to take Yusuf to the garden, where he could play safely under the. She watched him run between the flowers, laughing and having fun like any child. This made Layla feel a little better. But the peace was interrupted when one of the guards came quickly to her. Miss Layla, said Mr. Khalid. Mr. Khalid needs you in the main hall right away. Layla's heart was beating very fast. She stayed calm. She told the maid to take care of Yusuf and followed the guard to the hall. When she arrived, she saw Khalid talking to a serious-looking man. A man in formal clothes looked at Layla as she entered. Khalid motioned for her to come closer. This is Mr. Farid, he said. He's an investigator hired to help us solve the problem with Safia. Layla nodded to greet Farid. What have you discovered so far? Farid opened a folder and showed some documents. Safia is in contact with important people outside the palace. A man in a suit looked at her. He noticed her enter. He turned to her and said, This is Mr. Farid. He's an investigator hired to help us solve the problem with Safia. Layla greeted Farid with a nod. What have you discovered so far? Farid opened a folder and revealed some documents. Safia is in contact with important people outside the palace, including a member of the local police. She's planning to use these connections to fabricate more false evidence against you. A chill ran down Layla's spine. That means I'm still in danger. Don't worry. Khalid intervened. We're monitoring her every move. It's important for you to know what we're up against. Layla thanked Khalid and Farid, though she was still worried. She knew Safia was cunning. She's dangerous. Later, Layla returned to Yusuf's room and found him drawing on a sheet of paper. He smiled as she entered. Look, Mama. It's you and me in the garden. Layla knelt down to see the drawing, her heart swelling with love. She said, It's beautiful. My dear. She hugged him tightly. silently promising herself that she would do whatever it took to keep him safe. That night, Khalid convened a meeting with his most trusted allies in the palace's private hall. He explained the situation in detail, emphasizing how important it was to expose Safiya and ensure Layla and Yusuf's safety. She's already caused too much damage, Khalid said firmly, that we need to uncover her lies before she gains more allies. One of the men suggested intercepting Safiya's messages to learn more about her plans. Khalid agreed and tasked Farid is in charge of the operation. Meanwhile, in a hidden part of the city, Safiya met with a strange-looking man. We don't have much time, she said, handing him an envelope. Make sure these documents get to the right people. The man nodded and left into the night. Safiya smiled, sure that she was about to win. The days that followed, the tension in the palace grew. Khalid and a man in formal clothes looked at her. He noticed her enter. Khalid turned to face her and invited her to come closer. This is Mr. Farid, he said. He's an investigator hired to help us solve the problem with Safiya. Hello, Farid, Layla said. What have you discovered so far? Farid opened a folder and revealed some documents. Safiya is in contact with important people outside the palace. Farid worked tirelessly to gather evidence against Safiya, while Layla did her best to keep Yusuf distracted and away from the problems. Finally, one afternoon, Farid brought good news. We intercepted a crucial message. We now have enough evidence to expose Safiya. Call it immediately. A family council meeting was called for. Layla was invited to attend, knowing that her life and Yusuf's. A man in formal clothing looked at her. He noticed her enter. Khalid turned to face her and said, Layla, this is Mr. Farid. He's an investigator hired to help us resolve the matter with Safiya. Layla greeted Farid with a nod. What have you discovered so far? Farid opened a folder and revealed some documents. Safiya is in contact with influential figures outside the palace. They were at stake. In the main hall, the council members were gathered. Their expressions were solemn. Khalid presented the evidence Farid had collected, including messages that revealed Safiya's malicious intentions. Safiya has endangered not only Layla and Yusuf, also the reputation of this palace, Khalid declared. Her actions are unforgivable. The council reviewed the evidence. It didn't take a man in formal attire looked at her. He noticed her entrance. Khalid turned to face her and invited her to come closer. This is Mr. Farid, he said. He's an investigator hired to help us resolve the matter with Safiya. Layla greeted Farid with a nod. What have you discovered so far? Farid opened a folder and revealed some documents. Safiya is in contact with influential figures outside the palace. They want a decision. Safiya was to be officially banished from the palace and handed over to the authorities to answer for her crimes. Layla felt immense relief as she heard the verdict. At last, the threat was being eliminated. Safiya was escorted out of the palace under the watchful eyes of the guards. Her expression was a mix of fury and humiliation. She offered no resistance. When the doors closed behind her, Layla felt a huge weight lift off her shoulders. Khalid came to her, his eyes showing both relief and determination. Now Yusuf can finally have peace, he said with a gentle smile. Layla nodded and moved. Thank you, Khalid. Everything. I did what was right, she said. As the doors closed behind her, Layla felt as though a tremendous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Khalid approached her, his eyes reflecting both relief and determination. Now Yusuf can finally have peace. he said with a gentle smile. I'm glad, Layla replied. I did what was right. I'll do whatever it takes to ensure you both remain safe from now on. That night, Layla sat on the balcony of her room, gazing at the stars. The first time in a long while, she felt a genuine sense of calm. Yusuf slept peacefully. Khalid had kept his promise to protect them. Layla knew that the future. She replied, I'll do whatever it takes to keep you both safe from now on. That night, Layla sat on her balcony and looked at the stars. The first time in a long time, she felt calm. Yusuf slept peacefully. Khalid had kept his promise to protect them. Layla knew that the future might still be difficult. The next few days were calm. Safia had left the palace. Khalid had kept his promise to protect Yusuf and her. Layla still felt like something bigger was coming. One morning while having coffee, on the terrace, Khalid approached, looking more relaxed than usual. He held a small envelope in his hands, his eyes carrying a peculiar glimmer. Layla. He began handing her the envelope. I want you to read this. Layla opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter. The words, though simple, carried an emotional weight. It was Khalid approached the terrace, looking more relaxed than usual. He held a small envelope in his hands, his eyes carrying a peculiar glimmer. I want you to read this, he said, handing her the envelope. Layla opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter. The words, though simple, carried an emotional weight. It was a formal message from Khalid, offering her the freedom to leave the palace with Yusuf if she wished. Why are you giving me this? She asked, confused. I want you to know that you've never been a prisoner here. Khalid explained. You are free to choose what's best for you and your son. But I also want you to know that if you decide to stay, this palace will always be your home. Layla looked at Khalid, feeling a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. What if I don't know what the best choice is? Khalid stepped closer, his eyes meeting hers. Then I ask you to trust me. Not just as someone who promised to protect you. As someone who deeply cares about you. As Layla thought about what Khalid had said, Yusuf played in the garden, laughing and running with a small wooden airplane Khalid had bought for him. The scene was simple but meaningful. Layla knew Yusuf was safe here, something she had never been able to ensure elsewhere. Yet the thought of depending on Khalid still worried her. Unsettled her. She had always fought alone. Allowing someone to become such an important part of her life was new and scary. That evening, Khalid arranged a special dinner on the terrace. The table was decorated with flowers and candles. A gentle breeze made the atmosphere even more inviting. Layla hesitated to accept the invitation, eventually decided to go. While all this was happening, she asked, as she sat down, I want to celebrate the fact that we're finally free from threats. Khalid replied with a sincere smile. And more importantly, I want to celebrate you and Yusuf. Layla couldn't help but smile. As cautious as she was, she couldn't deny that Khalid made everything feel lighter. As the evening went on, they talked about everything. Their lives before they met each other. The challenges they had faced. The dreams they still had. The first time, Layla felt she could truly trust Khalid. I know it's early to think about the future, Khalid said. Breaking the moment, a formal message from Khalid offering her the freedom to leave the palace with Yusuf if she wished. Why are you giving me this? She asked, confused. I want you to know that you've never been a prisoner here, Khalid explained. You are free to choose what's best for you and your son. I also want you to know that no matter what you choose, I'll stand by your side. Layla took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. Thank you, Khalid. Everything. In the days that followed, Layla began exploring new possibilities. She didn't want to simply be protected, she wanted to build something for herself and Yusuf. Herself and for Yusuf. Khalid recognized her determination and encouraged her to pursue whatever would make her happy. One morning, he led her to a small hall within the palace that had been unused for years. I thought you might turn this into something of your own, he suggested, maybe a school for Yusuf and other children. A space to teach dance. Layla remained silent. Deeply moved by the gesture, she knew Khalid was showing her that she could play an important role here. Not just as a guest. As someone who could contribute to this place. It's beautiful. She finally said that I'd love to do something like this. As Layla began planning what she would do with the hall, Khalid watched her from a distance, feeling satisfied. He had always known Layla was strong and determined. Seeing her thrive under his protection made him happy, however. Khalid also knew that challenges still lay ahead. His position in the palace and his connection to Layla could spark new conflicts. He would need to be ready to face them. One afternoon, as Layla worked in the hall, Yusuf came running in, holding a piece of paper. Mama, look what I drew. Layla took the paper and saw a simple but meaningful drawing. It was of her, Yusuf, Khalid, all holding hands with a bright sun. A formal message from Khalid offering her the freedom to leave the palace with Yusuf if she wished. Why are you giving me this? She asked, confused. I want you to know that you've never been a prisoner here, Khalid explained. You are free to choose what's best for you and your son. But I also want you to know that if you shining above them. It's beautiful. My love, she said, hugging her son. Khalid, who had just entered the room, smiled as he saw the drawing. Looks like we're already a family, he remarked playfully. Layla looked at him. For the first time, she felt that it could truly be possible. The following week, Layla woke with a sense of peace. She hadn't felt this way in a long time. The security Khalid provided, Yusuf's laughter, filled her heart with hope. That morning, as she strolled through the garden, Khalid approached her with a look that blended seriousness and warmth. Layla, may I steal you away for a few hours today? He asked, extending his hand. Where are we going? She asked, surprised. It's a secret, he replied with an enigmatic smile. Khalid took her to the desert, where a hidden oasis appeared out of nowhere. The place was magical, with palm trees swaying gently in the breeze and a lake that reflected the sky. At the center of the oasis was a table elegantly decorated with white flowers and candles. Khalid, what is this? Layla asked, amazed. I want this moment to be unforgettable, he replied, pulling out a chair for her to sit. During dinner, Khalid spoke about he took her to the desert, where a hidden oasis appeared. The place was magical, with palm trees that swayed gently in the breeze and a lake that reflected the sky. At the center of the lake was a table elegantly decorated with white flowers and candles. Khalid, what is this? Layla asked, amazed. I want this moment to be unforgettable, he replied, pulling out a chair for her to sit. During dinner, Khalid spoke about how Layla and Yusuf had transformed his life. Before you, this palace was just an empty structure. he said. But now it's a home. I want to make it official. Layla looked at him, puzzled. Until Khalid stood and took a small box from his pocket. He knelt down, his eyes fixed on hers. Layla. From the moment you entered my life, everything changed. You've brought light to my darkest days and shown me the truth. Meaning of love and courage. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? Layla was speechless. Tears streaming down her face. With a voice choked with emotion. She replied. Yes. Khalid. I will. Khalid smiled as he slipped the ring onto her finger. A delicate gold band with a small diamond that sparkled in the sunlight. He stood and pulled her into a tight embrace, followed by a gentle filled with love. The next few months were spent getting ready for the wedding. Yusuf was thrilled and involved in every detail. The palace was made to look like a fairy tale, with gardens that had flower arches and lights that looked like stars. On the big day, Layla wore a white dress with small gold details. Her light veil moved in the wind as she walked down the aisle with Yusuf, who held her hands and was proud. Khalid waited for her at the altar, wearing a perfect ceremonial tunic. His smile was calm. His eyes showed the deep emotion of the moment. When their eyes met, Layla felt as though the weight of her past had disappeared. The officiant spoke words of unity. Khalid slipped a new ring onto Layla's finger. When she did the same for him, they both felt whole. After the ceremony, the reception was held in the palace gardens. Guests danced, laughed, celebrated the couple's union. Layla and Khalid danced beneath the stars while Yusuf ran between the tables, handing out small bouquets of flowers. Khalid. Layla whispered as they danced, thanked him for everything. He said that Khalid had given him a home and a new life. That he should thank him. Khalid's voice was filled with emotion. He replied. You've brought joy and meaning into my life. Months turned into years. Life at the palace flourished. Layla transformed one wing of the palace into a school for local children, while Khalid dedicated himself to expanding his humanitarian projects. Yusuf grew up happy, surrounded by love and security. He loved helping Layla at the school and often accompanied Khalid on some of his trips, learning about responsibility and leadership. Every day, Layla felt that her decision to trust Khalid and accept his love had been the right one. The past, though difficult, had prepared the way for a future full of love, hope, happiness. What did you think of Layla and Khalid's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon to receive notifications for all our stories. Don't miss more heartwarming tales.